I'm Alan Wallace of ColaDaily.com. I'm joined today by Morihiko Nakahara. He's music director for the South Carolina Philharmonic and also an experienced Columbia, South Carolina ambassador for this year. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Alan. Great to be here.
So tell us first, what's going on with the Philharmonic these days? What do you guys have coming up?
Yes, well, as we are recording this, we have a few performances that are coming right up at the Courier Center. And as you know, and I think as many people know, that the Courier Center here on campus is a huge hub for the performing arts, and that is our home as well, and that's where we tend to do a lot of the Masterworks concerts and the huge concerts. But what's new for us, and it kind of goes back to the pandemic, was that we now started doing more taking smaller groups of musicians into different parts throughout the area, throughout Columbia and Irmo and so on. Places where you might not expect to see quote classical musicians, like breweries and pubs and so on.
That's great.
And some of the outdoor venues too. And that sort of outdoor thing was sort of what was necessitated during the pandemic, because we wanted to find a way to share our music, but because of the protocols and so on, we needed to kind of be creative and explore new outlets. And that was so successful that we've now kind of incorporated all of those things into our sort of regular offerings.
That's awesome. Yeah. And this is your 15th year, I believe, right? With
Has it been 15 years? I mean,
that's what your bio says. So I believe it.
Kind of lose track after after a few years.
But coming up with creative things, I know, has been a big part of. You've done a lot of that in your time here, and from what I know, that part of your mission, as you see it, is to make the music that y'all play available to more people, to bring more people in and let them know, hey, this is what classical music is, and it's really for everybody, right?
Yeah, and I think, sometimes we tend to kind of, traditionally speaking, classical music, in general, orchestras in particular, I think, sometimes there's sort of a stigma around it, right?
Sure.
A lot of people think, well, they didn't learn it in school. Is it something we're going to enjoy? Nowadays, I think there's so many entry points and connection points with various people in the community through music. And we now focus really on the importance of live music and live ensemble music. So that could be, film soundtracks. A lot of people hear the sound of orchestra first through a great, John Williams score written for a Spielberg film or Star Wars or something like that. It's the same instruments and same kind of technique that, all these other composers have used. So, it's a great sort of a gateway in a way into orchestral music, ensemble music and live music in general. So, we tend to focus more on that. And so that's why we create programming for families, programming for film buffs and people who love John Williams or the films that he scored. Things like collaborations. I think that is a key, and in a place here like in Columbia in particular, there are so many great organizations, both performing arts and otherwise. I think we do now a lot of kind of collaborations and partnerships with a great nonprofits all across the board here.
That's fantastic. And that brings me to your new role as an experienced Columbia, South Carolina ambassador, which I feel like you've been unofficially for many years now, but taking on that formal title this year. And this group of ambassadors comes from different walks of life, different backgrounds. Y'all play different roles, but you in particular, you just mentioned, you of course are one of the leaders of the arts here in Columbia, and as you mentioned, Columbia may be more of a hub for the arts than people who don't live here might realize, right?
Right, yeah. So, my very first time when I came to Columbia, South Carolina was in the fall of 2007.
Sure.
And that was part of the job interview process. And, I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
I have been working some down in Jacksonville, Florida at the time. I was based out in Washington State at the time, had lived in other parts of the country, but I just wasn't familiar with the scene, so to speak, here. And I was just so surprised in a way by how how adventurous people here are. You know, they're always kind of willing to try, you know, at least give it a try to new things, and that goes to music, that goes to visual arts, that goes to cuisine, you know, restaurants as well. So I just found here in Colombia such an appetite, so to speak, for cultural things. You know, people, I think, generally are. I find that they're curious. You know, they're curious people who want to, you know, at least try something new, and that is sort of a great starting point for somebody in my profession. I think that's a blessing, really, that you don't necessarily encounter in many places of this size around the country. So from the get-go, you know, and that's. I was here for a week that first trip, and I really fell in love with the city, with the orchestra as well. And you know, those job process for conductors, it's a very elongated process. You know,
I can imagine.
I came in for an interview in October. There were other candidates throughout that season, so we didn't find out till, you know, the following April, late April or so. But before I got the call, I knew that if I was made the offer, I was going to take it. There was no question.
Yeah, that's great.
And you know, I've been blessed to work here since, right?
Yeah,
starting officially in 2008. So yeah, 15th season now. And you know, there are so much going on, almost to the point now where there are. I mean, if you find yourself in this area of town, like the Vista area, for instance, even on a Thursday night, I mean, it's so busy.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
one of my colleagues, we were just talking as we record this interview, is going to the Coder Center to see Hairspray tonight.
Right.
The touring Broadway show is in town.
Right, and exactly.
On a Thursday.
Right, and then we are rehearsing in the same building.
Oh yeah.
You know, at the same time. So just within the Coger Center area, there's just, you know, there's so much happening. So many to choose from, so many options, so many interesting restaurants opening up, and I'm such a, you know, I love to eat, right? So I'm always on the lookout for great restaurants, great locally owned restaurants too, of which there are so many to choose from here in Colombia. And so yeah, I mean, it's a great place. When I started, it was sort of interesting, you know, to me, because 15 years ago, when I first joined this community, I felt like, I mean this in the positive, the best way possible, that, you know, we had like a little chip on our shoulder, because, you know, people, you know, nationally, people tend to talk about our neighbor in Charleston, our neighbor up in the mountains in Greenville, and so on. And, you know, I think in a good way we had this chip on our shoulder. And I think, you know, collectively Colombia has done such a great job to really like emphasize its positive quality and its you know, its appeal, you know.
That's great.
And a lot of that appeal comes from its people, to me, and the people I get to work with day in, day out.
Yeah. So. And as I mentioned, we're doing this series. We're talking to each of the ambassadors, and John Shearer from Historic Columbia was our interview before you, and he's lived here all his life. So it's an interesting contrast. Grew up in Columbia. You, of course, did not come here until adulthood, and you grew up in Japan. You've lived in Spokane. You've lived in Massachusetts. So you've been all around, and but found this to be a place that attracted you, a place you wanted to be. Obviously, you could live somewhere else if you wanted to. What's it been about Columbia that's and you mentioned a couple of things, but what's it been that made you say, "Hey, I want to stick around in this place"?
You know, there's I feel like now we're being on a huge growth spurt in a way, and I'm just so excited to see what's going to come next.
Absolutely.
For Colombia and you know, surrounding area. I feel like we're starting to really burst at the seams, and that presents. And there are more and more people, folks moving into the area, especially during and after the pandemic. So I feel like we're on this growth, you know, projection that is, you know, who knows what's. I think the sky is the limit when it comes to what we can accomplish here.
That's great. And you mentioned the pandemic. I imagine as a musician and as leader of the Philharmonic, that was an especially large challenge for y'all. Had to really limit what you could do. And you mentioned doing some small group outdoor things, but that had to be, you must be glad to be back to pretty normal now, right?
Yeah. I think that, that was when, I think I speak for many of my colleagues who are in the same, not just in music, but performing arts, theater, dance, and so on. Yeah. It's just, we sometimes we take things for granted, right? Just the fact that we can put a group of musicians together and play together, that became a challenge during the pandemic, and not to mention being able to share that with people. And I think a lot of us realized at that time then how important our audiences are. We tend to, musicians, we tend to kind of, that's part of the nature of what we do. We tend to sort of, lock ourselves up in the practice room and work on our own. And then go on stage and perform, but without the audience to share that with, it's just an entirely, performance within an audience is just a practice. It's just a rehearsal in a way. Yeah. So it kind of really taught us, and then also really helped us to be versatile and adaptive in a way, like these things with small groups of musicians going all around the community. And the weather really cooperated with us here, because it's we could perform outdoors well into November before it was too cold.
In January, February, a lot of times.
So that did help, and but I think we also really we were fortunate to be based at the Koga Center, which I mean they've done such a great job as far as getting all the technology figured out for live stream. We started streaming our concerts. Started sort of first step coming back from the pandemic, when a lot of folks were still not comfortable going to large gatherings indoors. So we wanted to be able to make that available to everybody. So things like that, where we really kind of had to rethink how we go about our business. And I think overall, I mean, it was such a challenging period, but as a result, I think we came out a lot stronger in many ways.
Yeah, definitely. So when you're not on the job, when you're not doing music, what are some of your favorite places to go, things to do in Colombia? You mentioned you like a lot of different food. What are some of your favorite places to eat?
Let's see. Well, as you mentioned, I grew up in Japan. So, and that's an interesting thing. When people from other parts of the U.S., when they think of great Japanese food, Columbia, South Carolina might not be on that top of that list, right? Usually, I would imagine. But when I first came for my job interview, I went to Inakaya for the first time then, and I was so impressed. And then I'm still friends with some of those people who run that restaurant, and I go there as often as I can, and I like to take our guests who are from out of town. A lot of them, they're from like New York City or other places, and they're always, I mean, they just fall in love with that place too. And of course, in downtown area, there's so much now. Bourbon is prime example of that, right? And places like Mortar Supply, which is just down the block from you guys, and so great food. And of course, I didn't know what things like she crab soup was until I started working here. Or I don't think I ever had before I started working in South Carolina, I don't think I really had a sense of what shrimp and grits. I was
just about to ask if grits were a thing you had encountered before you came here.
Right. So now when I go to other parts of the country for work, and if I happen on a restaurant, go to a restaurant that has grits or something, I'm curious, right? I have to try it, to compare. But it just doesn't compare usually to what you can get.
That's great.
Here in Colombia. So yeah,
that's great. And you found the people as a person moving here as an adult, you found the people friendly. You found it a welcoming place to move to.
Yeah, and I think we tend to use the term Southern hospitality.
Exactly.
And I didn't really know what that meant until I got here for the first time, and it was almost in some ways, it is quite a difference from some other parts of the country where people are, if you're a guest here. as I was the very first time. You know, I felt like I was, you know, really like really well taken care of.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Very much a cultural thing. It's not just something people say. It's Southern hospitality. People take it seriously.
Right. Yeah.
That's great. And so, as an ambassador this coming, have you had a chance to hang out much with your fellow class members of the new class of ambassadors yet?
Not yet, actually.
I know you all are just getting started.
Yeah, we just got started, and you know, I met everybody at the official announcement.
Sure.
A few weeks ago. There was like a gathering like last week or a couple weeks ago. I couldn't make that because of my schedule.
Oh,
but
of course.
I am, you know, I'm hoping that over the next few months I will really have a chance to, you know, get to know everybody.
That's great. Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you taking time. We know you have such a busy schedule. Appreciate you taking time to talk with us. And again, Morihiko Nakahara. He's the music director for the South Carolina Philharmonic and an experienced Columbia, South Carolina ambassador. And check out coladaily.com for more on the ambassadors program, the Philharmonic, and everything else happening here in Columbia.